Obviously, you have been in the news as far as MMA is concerned. And I'm wondering, I mean, you're no stranger to people reacting to the things that you say. This is part of your job, and I think that you do a phenomenal job of that, and you have assumed that responsibility. But considering the brief appearances that you made at UFC 246 post-fight on SportsCenter on the post-fight show, were you surprised at all at the reaction to the things that you were saying and did say by the MMA community, the fighters, the fans, everyone involved, the media as well?
Well, I ultimately was surprised by what Joe Rogan had to say. I certainly wasn't surprised by what, fans and critics have. I mean, listen, I'm a polarizing figure. When I speak, you're going to have people that side with me and agree with me. You're going to have people who don't. Personally speaking, I don't give a damn. I say what I feel. I mean what I say, and it's based on what I witness. And so for me, when I'm the fight game, like I've been covering boxing my entire career and have been following boxing since I was 3 years old. There are people who disagree with me about Triple G versus Canelo Alvarez. There's people who disagree with me when we talk about the possibility of Errol Spence versus Terrence Crawford. There are people who have disagreed with me in the past, whether it was about Andre Ward versus Kovalev 1 or something along those lines. That goes with the territory. And you understand that, and you go with it from there. As it pertains to the UFC, I'm certainly no aficionado. I leave it up to you and guys like Brett Okamoto and, Chael Sonnen and Michael Bisping and Daniel Cormier and a host of people that I've had the honor and privilege to work with. I know that you guys are the experts. You guys are the ones that cover the sport religiously. But to me, I wasn't covering UFC. When I was at UFC 246, I wasn't covering the UFC overall as the sport. I was there to talk about that fight, and I know what I'm watching. And so for me, to look at Conor McGregor, to see 3 shoulder shrugs to the nose of Cowboy Cerrone, obviously he broke his nose, beat up his face pretty well and what have you. Joe Rogan was of the mindset that Conor McGregor showed a lot. I respectfully disagree. Number one, I don't believe there's so much you can show in 40 seconds in most instances. Number two, what Joe Rogan doesn't know is I was speaking to a guy by the name of Ariel Helwani, who I'm talking to right now, who kept reminding me leading up to the fight, Cowboy Cerrone doesn't show up in big events. The lights get brighter. He kind of shrinks, Stephen A. Look out for that, Stephen A. Is that not what you kept telling me? That's exactly what you kept telling me leading up to that fight. And so for me, I watched the fight, and I'm like, my God, all you got off was one kick, which was blocked by Conor McGregor, and that's it? That's not going to cut it against Nurmagomedov. That's not going to cut it against Masvidal. My mentality is that when you're a champion or you're somebody that aspires to be the champion, whoever the measuring stick is at that particular moment in time is someone I'm fantasizing about you going up against. And so to me, what we saw from Conor McGregor that night showed us nothing about what he would potentially do in a rematch against Nurmagomedov. So to say something like that, to me, it's not sacrilegious. It's not a crime against the sport or anything like that. As an observer and a reporter on pugilistic sports, this is what I saw at UFC 246. If you want to disagree with me, you're the great Joe Rogan. I respect that. I'm honored that you took into account my opinion with what he's done for the sport. But to take it to the point where it wasn't a good look for me to be there, it wasn't a good look for ESPN to be there, I thought that was beyond the pale, and I thought that was excessive and unnecessary. I certainly have profound respect for him, what he means to the UFC and to MMA sports, what his cachet brings, who he is, and I have profound respect for him, and he was incredibly nice to me and all of that stuff. And I will continue to be respectful and very nice to him. I harbor no animosity or whatever. I just thought to disagree with me would be one thing. But to act like I didn't even belong at the event because I have an opinion that differs from yours, I thought that was a bit extreme and unfair.
So it seems like the part that has drawn the ire of Joe Rogan and the MMA community is this idea that Cowboy quit. This idea that you can't talk about fighters in that light. Like you could talk about, the Spurs not showing up or the Chiefs not showing up, but fighters are different because of what they're doing and what they're putting on the line. Do you agree with that sentiment, or do you feel like you can talk about fighters that way, that it's all fair game, it's sports at the end of the day, and in your opinion, it's no different than the Lakers, the Cowboys, etc.?
It's a mixture of both. I think that, I would say the same thing in all likelihood if I was in Joe Rogan's position, because especially when you're talking about fighters who have far more courage than you and I would ever have in terms of getting in that octagon or the squared circle of boxing and going out there and virtually putting their lives on the line, literally putting their lives on the line. You certainly you at the very least, you need to be extremely reluctant to go that route. But look at how I'm looking at Ariel. I'm watching the fight, right? And I saw Conor McGregor come out, and he didn't pull a Masvidal in terms of trying to throw, just come out and try to knee a guy in the jaw. But he threw a haymaker to start. He missed him with the punch, but I believe it was the left thigh sort of caught Cerrone in the face. Okay, that's fine. And then after that, you're clutching and you're using the shoulder and you hit him in the nose 3 times. If you recall, there's a little break where Cerrone steps away. And I'm saying, and you've got about 49, 50 fights on your resume. You're experienced enough and you've won enough fights to know how to step back, gather yourself, and then, say, give me a few seconds to get away from this onslaught, and then I can get back into it. None of that happened. Conor McGregor comes right back at you. You throw a little side kick. It gets blocked. And then Conor catches you with a kick and ultimately takes you down. All I'm trying to say is that all of this happened inside of 20 seconds. Remember, the punches that ultimately finished the fight took up an additional 15 to 20 seconds. Everything else happened in the first 20 seconds. And my attitude is, with a guy that experienced, you couldn't find a way to survive. You might disagree with that point, saying, Steven, it happened. But my personal opinion is, unless you get caught with a haymaker and you're knocked senseless or something along those lines, if you had the wherewithal to gather yourself for a few seconds, you should have had the ability to last a little bit longer. That's my personal opinion. And it also emanates from the fact that Cowboy Cerrone had been knocked out the 2 previous fights he had, not to mention the fact that, again, when the bright lights arrive, he doesn't have the greatest reputation. All of those things lent itself towards me believing the guy appeared in over his head. The moment appeared too big for him, and he couldn't handle it. Now, is that saying quitting? Maybe that word quit isn't apropos. But I think it is apropos to say he had clearly appeared way in over his head. There's levels to this, and he did not appear to be on it. I don't think it's criminal to say that.
So in the midst of all of this on Saturday night, Conor McGregor popped up on Twitter and noted that Cerrone broke his nose and his orbital bone by those strikes and told you to apologize, asked you to apologize. What did you make of?
And I didn't.
Yeah. Why not?
I didn't, and I'm not. Because I meant what I said. And not only that, profound respect for Conor McGregor. Love the guy. He's phenomenal for the sport. I couldn't be more ecstatic that he won because I think he's the number one attraction in the sport. A matter of fact, I'm somebody that, if you recall, when you and I spoke in the aftermath of the Nurmagomedov fight, even though he clearly got beat, if you recall, Ariel, I was telling you, I got to give credit where credit is due. He stepped away from the sport. He engaged in an exhibition match against Mayweather. Then he comes back, and who does he fight? He fights this undefeated monster, Nurmagomedov, and he survived until the 4th round. Remember, he was getting slaughtered in the 2nd round. Or it looked that way because Nurmagomedov was on top of him, trying to take him out with strikes and what have you, and Conor found a way to survive. So what I'm saying to him is that he'll tell me to apologize. If you're telling me to apologize for using the word quit or whatever, fine, that's no problem. But don't tell me that the guy wasn't in over his head. Don't tell me the guy didn't look like the bright lights was just too big and too great for him. Don't tell me that it illuminated on him so much that he didn't seem to be able to handle the pressure of the moment. I'm not apologizing for that. Conor McGregor, as far as I'm concerned, despite 4 losses on his resume, is elite. And one of the biggest reasons he is elite, even though he's tapped out a couple of times or so, is this reality. He shows up. He shows up for the big events, and the big events never seem to be too much for him. Conor McGregor is not going to be somebody that goes out there and beats himself. You want to beat him, you're going to have to literally do that, beat him. And I don't think Conor McGregor asked me to apologize because of what I said. I think Conor McGregor asked me to apologize because of how Joe Rogan reacted to it. Because like Joe Rogan, Conor McGregor was protecting the sport. What they need to come to the realization of is this. I am not you guys. I don't pretend to be the aficionados that you guys are. If you recall my skit with my hit with Joe Rogan, when he said what he said, I literally said, I respect that coming from you, and I will defer to your knowledge. I actually said that on the air. I'm new to this. I'm not pretending to be some MMA aficionado, but I do know fighting. I do know what I'm watching. And I am entitled, based on my 25 years as a journalist in this business, to espouse a point of view based on what I saw. And I'm not going to apologize one bit. I think that they're protecting the sport, but I got news for them. I protect the sport, too, because I love it. And I've been blessed and fortunate that when I'm a part of something, people usually watch, and I contribute in a positive way to uplifting the sport. I want to uplift. I want to help in my small way to uplift not just the sport, but guys like you, Joe Rogan, and everybody else who cover it, fighters like Conor McGregor who participate in it. I am a fan. I'm going to be here for a long, long time. I'm personal friends with Dana White, who I think is sensational, and I feel the way that I feel. And if I feel differently than somebody, they're going to have to get over it because that's how I feel, and I ain't shy about saying what I feel because it happens to be my job. I will not apologize. And I will not backtrack from my position. And I don't care what Conor McGregor or Joe Rogan says, although I profoundly respect both. We will just have to respectfully disagree on what we saw.
So you just mentioned I'm new to this. However, Josh Gross, who's a veteran MMA reporter, now works for The Athletic, used to work for ESPN and Sports Illustrated, tweeted a couple days ago, I haven't paid attention to this conversation, but I want to note that Stephen A. Smith covered UFC 41 in February of 2003 in Atlantic City when Tim Sylvia stopped Rico Rodriguez. He and I were the only reporters in Sylvia's locker room after that fight. So for whatever it's worth, Smith has been covering MMA for years. That was his quote. Is that true? Did you cover UFC 41 in 2003? And if so, I would suggest then that you are not new to this.
Well, no, I was in attendance, but a lot of times I would show up to watch it because I enjoyed it. And one of the things I'll share with you a conversation that I had with Masvidal earlier that morning before fight night of UFC 246. I was talking about, they're talking about striking. They're talking about, chokeholds. They're talking about Muay Thai and all of this other stuff. And I said, listen, let me tell you something. In America, they loved boxing. When you talk about the UFC, you appreciate all those other elements to the fight game that you see in UFC that you would never see in boxing. But understand that Americans are addicted to the knockout when it comes from a pugilistic sport. So when I look at Conor McGregor, it's not just his bravado and his mouth that brings him home, or even the fact that he wins. If Conor McGregor was choking people out, if Conor McGregor was wrestling and he was forcing folks to tap out, he wouldn't be as popular as he is. Conor McGregor was popular because he's a knockout artist. When you talk about Masvidal and him potentially being the heir apparent to Conor McGregor in terms of being the face of the sport, the most popular guy in the sport, primarily it's going to be because of his knockout ability, the fact that he can finish you off, whether it's with a punch or a knee. The reality is that that's what Americans primarily are addicted to. So for me, I've gone to several events over the years, and I wasn't even working. But because I was there, ESPN or somebody else would put a camera in my face and ask me what I felt about what I watched. And that might have been what the guy from The Athletic was talking about, because I haven't covered but so many UFC events. I was sitting ringside when Conor McGregor felt Eddie Alvarez. I was sitting ringside when Daniel Cormier fought the dude with the lifetime contract with Popeye's Chicken and all of this other stuff. I was there ringside, but I didn't have to work those fights. I was just in attendance because I want to support you guys and I want us to support uplifting the sport, because I think the combatants are worthy of our attention. The more shine you bring to them, the more attention you bring to them, the more the sport will be popularized, the more money there is in it for them, for the sport itself, and for those like you and Joe Rogan and others who cover it. I'm not trying to be a detriment to anybody. I'm not trying to steal anybody's shine. As you well know, I got enough jobs.
Yeah.
I get enough airtime. Okay, so I'm fine. I just want to support a growing sport that I think is worthy of our attention and our accolades. And that's all I was trying to do, and that's what I'm going to continue to try to do. And anytime ESPN wants me on it, I'm happy. And if they don't want me on it, I won't lose any sleep over it.
See, I don't like this because I know that you're a big fan, because every time I'm here at the Seaport Studios, you come up to me and you don't just talk to me about McGregor. You mention Junior Dos Santos and Francis Ngannou and Masvidal. I know that you like and respect the sport very much like you like and respect basketball, football, baseball, etc. Yeah. And I want to ask you about something Joe Rogan said, which I think at the end of the day, why this isn't good for us as MMA fans, at the MMA community. We come across as fans of that band that was playing in dive bars for years and now finally made it, and they're headlining MSG, and we're like, no, we don't want anyone to attend that show. We don't want anyone to support them because we were there first. We don't want anyone else in there. And that's a bad look. That's not the martial arts way. We have to be inclusive, not exclusive. And he said this, which I want to ask you about. I just think this sport demands more appreciation, more respect, and it demands a higher level of reverence to the athletes who literally put their lives on the line. I agree with that. The athletes do put their lives on the line. But let's not be condescending towards other athletes. They put a lot on the line too. Kobe Bryant walked to the foul line with a ruptured Achilles. That's a fighter right there. I respect that man for doing that. And so to suggest that you don't respect fighters, that Dan Le Batard doesn't respect fighters just because you are critical of them or the sport, which has a lot of warts, by the way, it's not a perfect sport, to me is condescending at times, and it's disingenuous. And that's what I don't like. We need to allow other opinions. That's a byproduct of this sport growing, right? Of evolving and being mainstream.
I completely agree with you, but at the same time, here's where Joe Rogan is going to lose. He's going to lose if he thinks for 1 second there's going to ever be a disrespectful word uttered out of my mouth about him. It's not going to happen. I respect the hell out of him. I respect what he means to the sport. If we were together right now talking, give me 5 minutes with him and he'd probably start laughing and just having a good time. There's no hard feelings. He's protective of the sport. Here's what I think he's missing, and this is what people don't recognize about me. I was a reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer who got promoted numerous times and ultimately became a columnist. I didn't know hockey, Ariel, okay? But I still was sent to Game 7 of the Rangers in the Stanley Cup Finals, okay? Because it was part of my job to cover the story. You can cover stories. You can cover moments without being an aficionado or an expertise on the sport. If you ask me to get into the nuances of MMA, martial arts, UFC, I would look right into the camera and I would say, do you know Ariel Helwani? Do you know Joe Rogan? Do you know Brett Okamoto? Do you know these guys? Go to them. When Daniel Cormier and I were ringside together talking about one of the fights, he went first, and he broke out, cracked up laughing, and you could ask him, because I turned to the camera and I said, I'm going to go with what he said. And everybody started laughing because it's my way of making sure that they recognize, yeah, I'm Stephen A. And yes, I bring a level of cachet to the table in the world of sports broadcasting because I cover football, basketball, obviously with a level of expertise in other sports as well. And, of course, boxing, which I've been, again, watching since I was 3 years old and covering my entire career. I covered Olympic boxing in Australia in the Sydney Olympics, at the Sydney Australia Olympics in 2000. I covered boxing, again, in Athens, Greece in 2004, Olympic boxing, not to mention numerous fights. You understand? But my point to you is that regardless of what I know, I'm honest about what I don't know. And even if I did know the UFC, and even if I became an expert with the UFC, which as much as I'm watching it these days, I'm rapidly, getting my feet under me for what have you, I'm never going to take anything away from those like you guys who help uplift the sport and keep it afloat and alive, bringing it to the mind's ear and eyes of us all before ESPN grabbed a hold of it and is now trying to take it to another level. I don't want to be seen as somebody that you listen to instead of Joe Rogan. I want to be somebody that piggybacks off of Joe Rogan and says, hey, did you hear what this guy said? Did you hear what Ariel said? Did you hear what all of these people say? Because that's how you uplift the sport. I love you guys. I respect the hell out of you guys. And I appreciate the fact that from a professional perspective, we all have that in common. My only regret is that, at least for the moment, Joe Rogan did not seem to appreciate the fact that I have my own accomplishments in this industry. And just because I showed up to comment about a fight and I disagreed with him doesn't eradicate all that I've accomplished because you disagreed with me. All of that wasn't necessary. And that's all I'm saying. I harbor no hard feelings against him. He's a great guy. He's a great man. He's great for the UFC. And I'm honored to have been ringside with him. And I sincerely hope that I'll get an opportunity to do that in the future with all of you guys. You saw how happy I was to be there talking with you and Michael Bisping and Chael Sonnen and these guys. They know how I feel about them. Rashad Evans, one time when I did the UFC event at Barclays Center, at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, I was honored to be there alongside him. I've known John Bones Jones a little bit for years. We text each other back and forth from time to time. An Anderson Silva fan and what have you. A Weidman, I met him. He came on First Take on several occasions. Chuck speaks for itself. Matthews back in the day, they used to come on my shows and everything like that. I've been a fan for a while. So I'm not going anywhere, and I'm going to love the sport. And I would ask people to appreciate the fact that somebody in the mainstream loves your sport enough to keep the eyes and the attention on the sport so everybody could prosper. Let's just put on our big boy pants and understand that and move on.
Can I ask one last quick question? I know you're up against the clock, but right after all of this came out, this video of you hitting mitts emerged, and I think that people think that you posted the video to show your street cred, but that isn't the case. Could you just tell us the genesis of this video and the story behind it? Because they're using this as fuel to the fire that you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, first of all, they can say whatever they want. They're entitled. The video was horrific, and certainly I didn't put it out there. What happened was that I tore my rotator cuff last July. 3 days before the surgery, I was working out. You know, I was sitting there and doing my cardio and all of that stuff, but I wasn't doing anything. And silly me, the trainer was there with me, and I said to him, can I put on some boxing gloves? And he was like, listen, you don't need to be throwing any punches with your shoulders. You got one torn rotator cuff. You got some scar tissue in the other. You don't need to do anything. I said, I just want to put it on there. I said, I'm going to get surgery anyway, whatever. He said, all right, well, do me a favor and try to throw some uppercuts. Just don't do anything else because you're going to whack out your shoulder even more. Just try to do some uppercuts. It was after a 90-minute workout. I'm used to throwing 6, 8-punch combinations with far more speed than that. But the bottom line is that I was messed up. I had jacked up shoulders. I did not know it was being taped, and I certainly did not know it would be posted. It was a private workout, and for some reason, he put that damn thing out 7, 8 months ago. Needless to say, he won't be working with me any longer, but the point that I'm trying to make is that it certainly wasn't me at my best or anything like that, but again, that's fine. I'm a grown man. The bottom line is the video is what it was, which is an atrocious display of any kind of boxing or whatever. I actually laughed about it with Teddy Atlas. I said, there's a blessing in everything. And he said, and what would that blessing be? I said, the minute I overcome this rotator cuff, because I'm now 7 months removed from surgery, but it's going to be about another 3 months before I'm 100%. One of the first things I'm going to do is get into the gym with a real boxing trainer like yourself, Teddy. So I will be coming to your gym for you to show me what I should do, because when I'm fighting, I usually don't throw uppercuts. I'm a Tommy Hitman Hearns kind of guy. I like my right hand. I like staying on the outside using my jab in my right hand, not trying to be inside throwing some damn uppercuts with my tall, slim self. But nevertheless, it was an horrific display. It was never meant for public consumption. It should have never been put out there, but it was. And when you sit in my chair, bottom line is that I have to be judgmental and critical of what people do every single day in the world of sports. Who am I to bitch and moan about somebody taking an opportunity to get at me when I'm perceived as somebody who gets at something every day? A matter of fact, the one thing I loved about it is my willingness to show I can take it. Why? Because when I come at you, for whatever reason, you ain't going to be able to say to me, Steven, you couldn't take it when we came at you. I'm a big boy. I can take it. The video was atrocious. It wasn't meant for public consumption. It was done with jacked up shoulders. I should have never been throwing a punch to begin with. All right, I had surgery 3 days later. It is what it is. And you move on.
You're the man, Stephen A. I just want to say I really appreciate this. And, I guess I get a little defensive when I see the MMA community, my community, coming after you. And you don't need me to defend your honor at all. But I remember when I first met you at Mayweather McGregor, you knew who I was. That meant the world. That was before I worked for ESPN. And as I said on Twitter when that story came out about you in, I believe, GQ, you have gone out of your way to always give me props, to comment on my work. You don't have to do that. You can walk right by me, and that's totally understandable. And you've done that and has meant the world to me. So I will always have your back, even though you don't need me to have your back. And I hope that you continue to cover UFC events, and I hope to see you there, and you continue to critique and say whatever you want to say because you have earned that right, my man. So thank you so much for the time. Good luck out there in Miami. Keep up the great work as always, and I hope to see you again.
I appreciate it, but let me just say a couple of things. Number one, I think you do a great job, and I'm proud to call you a friend and a colleague. Number two, you teach me about the sport every single day, and all of you do, because there's not one single person that I've run across associated with the UFC that hasn't gone out of their way to show me things. Anything I ask Michael Bisping, I ask Rashad Evans, I ask Chael Sonnen and all these guys. You guys are just loaded with knowledge, even Brett Okamoto. Every time I go up to any of y'all never hesitate to tell me what I don't know, to show me or to answer any questions that I may have. And as it pertains to the sport, I'm just going to remind everybody of one thing. One thing that I've proven throughout my career is to be an asset. I aspire to be an asset for UFC's coverage. I don't aspire to replace anybody. I don't aspire to be somebody that's looked upon as, oh, I'm better than this guy, that guy. I love the sport. And I want to do what I can to help Joe Rogan, to help Dana White, to help Ariel Helwani, to help everybody uplift the sport so we can all benefit and we can all prosper. Unlike boxing, that's ran by promoters, you got a guy overseeing the sport in Dana White, if nothing else, who is great about giving us the fights we want to see when we want to see them instead of making us wait years and years and years for it. I'm incredibly grateful to that. I wish that he had such a profound impact that he was overseeing boxing. He is a friend. I am going to help him. I'm going to help you. I'm going to help the UFC in any way I can. And that includes being an asset in any small way that I can to Joe Rogan, who I have respected for years. If anybody is looking for me to get into something with him, they have come to the wrong place. It's unfortunate that he said what he said, but I didn't lose any sleep over it. It didn't change my day. It ain't going to change my night. And it damn sure ain't going to change my career. I'm going to be around, and I'm going to be around with my hand out, willing, able, and ready to provide any kind of small assistance that I can to help ESPN, the UFC, and everybody involved uplift the sport in any way that I possibly can. And that's really all I have to say.
Amen. Thank you, Stephen A. I really appreciate it.
Take care, guys.
Hello, everyone. It's Ariel Helwani. I just came here to thank you for watching our ESPN YouTube channel. It's the best. You know what else is the best? The ESPN app. You can get highlights, analysis, all that stuff and more. And if you want premium content and live streaming sports, there's only one place for all of that. It's ESPN Plus.